This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. Fellas, you've heard the phrase, look good, feel good, right? But why not add smell good to that too? That's where Sterling Soap Company comes in. First, Sterling Soap is 100% natural and has a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne. Second, there's a scent just for you. How about burgundy? Yeah, it's more than a color. The Sterling Soap folks blend natural essential oils with hints of mahogany, golden amber, and sandalwood. Or how about D503, an intensely masculine scent inspired by Legend by Mont Blanc. And third, you will feel good about the price. For just a little more than you'd pay at the grocery store, Sterling Soap will leave you feeling clean, refreshed, and ready for whatever's next. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com.
Hey there, sports history fan. Arnie Chapman here from the Sports History Network. Now, before you jump into this episode, I wanted to share with you an exciting giveaway we have going on with Home Field Apparel. We have a digital $50 gift card to homefieldapparel.com for one lucky fan of the Sports History Network. All you got to do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways to sign up. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
He was a staple on Monday Night Football, one of the game's great broadcasters. And for many, that's how they remember Frank Gifford. But for a generation before he stepped foot into the broadcast booth, he was one of the greatest to play in the NFL. A Hall of Famer, a touchdown maker, and a Pro Bowler on both sides of the ball. And next on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to take a look back on his spectacular gridiron career.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes, episode number 148, Frank Gifford. So let's think for a moment. Think about Frank Gifford. Go ahead and close your eyes. What do you see? Probably most see one of the greatest broadcasters of our time calling a game with the likes of Dandy Don Meredith and Howard Cosell. But how many pictured number 16 of the New York Giants scoring one of his 77 career touchdowns? My guess isn't many. On today's show, I'm going to take a look back at his spectacular career with my guest, Chris Willis, the head researcher at NFL Films. Gifford was able to score from almost anywhere on the field. He could burn you as a halfback, a flanker, or he could throw a touchdown pass too. Yes, Frank Gifford holds the NFL record for most touchdown passes by a non-quarterback in NFL history with 14. Before we jump into today's show about Gifford, a few reminders. Please follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on X at SportsFHeroes. Look for the Sports Forgotten Heroes page on Facebook. And no matter where it is you're listening, please give Sports Forgotten Heroes a like. As always, thanks for your support. And don't forget, if you want to get in touch with me, hit me up at sportsfh.info@gmail.com. That's sportsfh.info@gmail.com. Okay, let's get into today's show about Frank Gifford with my guest, Chris Willis. Chris, welcome back to Sports Forgotten Heroes. You're sort of a regular.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me back on, and it's always fun to talk forgot sports heroes, and especially some early pro football talk. So that's good. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely, anytime. Today's topic, Frank Gifford, is quite interesting. While I think definitely football fans from the 70s and 80s and into the 90s remember Frank, they remember him more for his broadcast career, I think, than what he actually did on the football field. And what he did on the football field was spectacular. I mean, how special was he? After all, he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the College Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was. I think that's what happens when you have like a long broadcasting career. So whether you're like John Madden or even like Troy Aikman now, there's a generation that's just know him as a broadcaster. I mean, Aikman's doing it for almost 20 years now, and then it'd be like, well, I mean, he actually played, but Gifford was the same way. He had such a really, successful broadcasting career. There was a generation that, hey, wait a minute, he was one of the best players, especially in Giants history. He's a top 5 all-time great player. But he's also a Pro Football Hall of Fame player, so he's, his legacy, is pretty, impactful, like I said, whether it's broadcasting or playing, so both his college and, dominant college player, and then, a great NFL player, probably you could say one of the more versatile players ever to play. He could do a lot of things that some players just couldn't do.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, versatile. You hit on the key word. I mean, the guy played safety. He was a flanker. He was a halfback. Talk about that. Talk about his versatility.
Yeah, I think coming out of USC, he was right at the edge of playing both ways. Post World War II, and I mean, the one thing I saw, watching some of his footage, he didn't play defensive back many years. He because it was at the time where it was just you're only playing one way, you're not playing two ways. At the NFL level, but his first touchdown is like an amazing a highlight. It was in 1953, and he's on defense. And the Giants were playing, Washington. Eddie LeBaron was the quarterback, and he throws a deep post, and Tom Landry, who was playing defensive backs, intercepted it and started to return it. Then he got hit, so he lateraled to Gifford. Gifford ran it in for a touchdown. So if you look at his first touchdown, you think, oh, he scored like an 18-yard interception. But no, actually, Landry's the one that intercepted it, lateral to Gifford, So, and he showed he could play defensive back, but his strength, if he played like in the 30s and 40s, he would have been both ways and would have been pretty good, but he focused on the offense side of the ball, and a lot of highlights, and like say, pretty much a triple threat. He could run, he could catch, and he could pass. I think he's got like 14 career touchdown passes, mainly from the halfback's position. So he could do everything. Whether it's running the ball, catching it, he could throw it, be that versatile. I think he could have returned kicks if he did it, a lot often. But he was very versatile and could do a lot of things, especially during that era.
Yeah, I mean, his versatility, I think, in a way, you wrote a book about 60-minute men. And while he might not have been the prototypical 60-minute guy, his versatility is, I think, what separated him from so many of the other stars of the day. Sure, he might not have played all 60 minutes, but he did play some. He was a Pro Bowler from the safety position. Now, he might not have played safety every game or every minute that the defense was out on the field, but when the offense was on the field, he was lining up either in the backfield or out wide. Talk about how his style of play maybe epitomized the word Iron Man in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I mean, just because he was a good looking guy, and like say he was later on TV, he did do some Hollywood stuff, and he was pretty tough. He was not somebody that couldn't take a hit. So
We'll talk about it.
yeah. Well, that so I think he would have, like I said, he was an Iron Man. I think in today's term, you could kind of say, oh, you know what, he would have been a 3-down back. Like if he's coming out now, I think with his physical skills and his toughness, he would not come off the field. He would not be just a first down guy, second down, or he'll just be like, he could be almost like a Christian McCaffrey type player, where, and could also throw, McCaffrey is kind of thrown a few halfback passes, but Gifford could throw, halfback pass as well as anybody. But I think he would have been like a 3-down player in today's game, and that's what he was. Definitely for the majority of his career. Whether he was in the backfield or as a flanker or more of a wide receiver type flanker, later in his career.
Talk about his understanding of the game and how that helped him. I mean, he had to have been able to break down a game and understand the role of so many different positions on the field in order to excel the way he did.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I think he had a high football IQ. Even when he went into broadcasting, he went into play-by-play a lot. But he could have been an analyst. Very rarely do guys go to do the play-by-play part. But he had a very good football IQ, and he had to, because he had to understand, not only the passing game, but also the running game, and from different positions, whether he lined up as a halfback or as a flanker. Like those are totally different positions, and so you have to know, when he ran the ball, he had to know how to set up his blocks, maybe not go too fast, hitting the hole. Then outside, you got to learn the whole passing tree, and he could do that. He could run, all the routes. He was more of an intermediate, so to speak, possession guy, but had some speed, to go over the top. So I think he used all that versatility. Keep using that word, but even as a receiver, he was versatile. He could do, a lot of things. And as a running back, he was versatile. He could do a lot of things, so. And a lot of it had to be knowing your assignments and knowing what to do. It just wasn't a simple, I'm a running back, now I'm a receiver. No, that's two totally different, positions that had to learn the ins and outs, and he played for, 14 years, you just don't last that long, not knowing, how to play the position, especially if you're changing position. And that's hard. Like there wasn't a lot of guys that, that were like a Lenny Moore or a Bobby Mitchell. It wasn't like every halfback was changing over to being a flanker. No, it did not, did not happen on every team in multiple players. So, so that football IQ was definitely there.
Yeah, I like your comparison to Christian McCaffrey. Over the course of his career, Gifford scored 34 touchdowns rushing the ball. He rushed for 3,609 yards. He also scored 43 touchdowns catching the ball and caught passes for 5,434 yards. I mean, this guy did it all. And you've talked about it a couple of times. You touched upon it. A fact that I don't think many people know is not only did he play safety, not only was he a flanker, not only was he a halfback, but at least in the research that I found, and again, you touched upon this, he completed 29 of 63 passes for 823 yards from the halfback position. 14 of those passes were for touchdowns. He threw 6 interceptions. Okay.
That actually wasn't a high number of interceptions. Like a lot of those guys would just chuck it and you're like, oh, okay, I had a few interceptions. So, so that very effective, like, and I think some certain things that get lost that you see nowadays, like, well, other teams had to game plan for that. Like when you played the Giants, they were effective doing that play, especially 50 into the 60s. So it was. He was very effective, and also it was a weapon that like other teams like, okay, we got to watch. You got to watch Giff. Throwing the halfback pass. Gets a little tricky. And stuff. So the Giants were able to use that as a weapon too. So I think that added to his versatility as we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think that those 14 touchdown passes might be the record for the most touchdown passes in the history of the NFL thrown by a non-quarterback, a guy not playing quarterback. It's pretty remarkable. Can you talk at all about his college career and give us a little bit of background on Frank, how he got involved in the game of football and his time at USC, Southern Cal, and how that helped prepare him for his career in the NFL?
Yeah. Well, at this time, you're talking late 40s, early 50s, and USC was, very well-known program, especially on the West Coast. And he learned, especially, from the halfback position. I mean, he was the guy that, carried a lot of the weight on the offensive side of the ball, for USC during those years, and attracted a lot of attention, from teams there to the NFL. At this time in the early 50s, you didn't have huge scouting departments, but he was on everybody's radar, especially after his senior year. And like I said, you still had to be versatile. I believe, 12th overall pick, I think, in the draft. Was 11th. And I think
you were close.
Yeah. And I think two backs drafted ahead of him were Ali Matson and Hugh McElhaney, and those two guys ended up in the Hall of Fame. So it wasn't like a bunch of stiffs went ahead of him, so 11th overall pick. So high, some expectations, like I said, going to New York helped, here's a good looking Gifford, he had already had some Hollywood connections at USC with some of the USC players, even going back to like John Wayne in the 30s, like, played football, but then also did some movie work, and that they made that their life's work. But, Gifford was more into it. So I think it was extremely lucky or fortunate that it was the Giants who drafted him, because they gave him a platform. It wasn't like going to Green Bay or the Chicago Cardinals or even, Washington. Like, so New York had the New York crowd and then, the entertainment capital of the world, so he was able to feed off that with his popularity, but they used him from the get-go. Like, there was going to be no doubt that he was going to be a starter and that they were going to plug him in. But I think, like I said, USC prepared him. There were a lot of decent USC players coming into the NFL at that time, and he was by far, obviously one of the greatest to ever play, at USC.
And he was able to assimilate into the New York market without much difficulty.
No, first of all, we've talked. He's a good-looking guy, so he tracks the females, and then he also guys want to be like him and be around him, and he was successful. Like I said, he was very good from the get-go. The team was really starting to build. So 53, obviously 54 and 55. It was somewhat pretty quickly like this team was going to compete, and then obviously the championship season in 56. So right, 53, 54, 5. Yeah. So his fourth year, he's the best player in the NFL. He's voted MVP by the UPI, and so he's the best player in the league, leads the league in yards from scrimmage, which I think was like over 1,400, which was really good.
1,420 22
Yeah.
yards.
In
He caught 4 touchdown passes, rushed for 5. Yeah.
And he in 12 games too, right? So he's averaging over 100 scrimmage yards, because he did both. He was not somebody you're just going to keep handing him the ball. He caught passes and he ran the ball and stuff. So he's the best player. Like in 4 years, he goes from USC, the 11th pick, and all of a sudden he's the best player in the league, and his team's winning the NFL championship, and came close in 58, 59, 60, 62, 63. So he was part of that glory, sort of era of Giants football. They only won one, but they played in a bunch of huge games, especially the NFL championship game.
Yeah, the Giants played in a ton of NFL championship games, and I think they won less than half of them. And like you said, he led the league in 56 with 1,422 yards from scrimmage in only 12 games. 1,000 yards back in the 50s and 60s was a heck of a lot more than 1,000 yards is in today's game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not even close now. I mean, it took a while. Even like with Van Buren, and especially like Joe Perry was the first one to go back to back that. So what? And you got to think he was the only guy doing it. It wasn't like, oh wow, there's 5 other runners with that. No, usually one guy got to 1,000, and then that was it. Not until you got to the 60s and into the 70s. So Gifford was never going to be 1,000-yard rusher, but because of the versatility and the Giants using them in both ways, you also got to think Lombardi is the offensive coordinator, and he loves to run the power sweep. He loved the running game. So he used Gifford. He sort of let him, do what he does best. And, when you have a horse like, a player like Gifford, you just feed him the ball. And Gifford had a lot of sort of really good continuity with Charlie Connerly, who's the quarterback, and then Wyatt Till later. It's almost like Jerry Rice a little bit. Not to say he was like him as a player, but hey, Joe Montana, Rice was the best. And then when Steve Young came in, throws left-handed, it's weird. Rice still, Gifford was able to adapt, to both quarterbacks during his time, and was still highly successful.
How did Frank's role evolve through his NFL career with the Giants?
Well, like we mentioned earlier, the versatility was part of his game, throughout. Now he was a better runner in his early years, probably the first, 5 or 6 years. Not like I said, he was not the primary ball carrier all the time. They had Alex Webster, they had Mel Triplett, so they did split some carries, but he was able to play, out of the backfield, throwing the halfback passes, lining up outside and being a mismatch, sometimes against man-to-man coverage a little bit. And had great hands, like I said, was very reliable, catching the ball. Did have a little bit of trouble with fumbles, which came back to hurt. But outside of that, like I said, very reliable, especially catching the ball. And so then later in his career, when you start from, 59, definitely 60, and then 62, 63, 64, he was mainly a flanker. He would just line up outside, and became one of the, he's still one of the best players in the league. I thought it was fascinating looking at his career, that when he's like 32 and 33 years old, 1962, 63, he has career highs in touchdown catches, and 63, he's 33 years old. He's beat up. I know we'll talk about the hit. He misses an entire season, but in 1963 with Tittle, he catches 7 touchdowns. He has like 800 yards. Like he sets career highs. I think he has 50 catches, almost career highs in yards. And he's 33 years old. Like you would think he would be really slowing down, the big hit in 1961, or at the end of the 60s. No, he actually was just as good as anybody in the league in 62 and 63. He has 14 touchdowns. Both years he has 7. I think his career high before it was like 4,
Exactly.
but, and that's the reason why his totals, I believe when he retired, I think after 1964, he was number 1 in touchdowns scored in Giants history, and he's in the top 5 in NFL history. Only like Don Hudson, Jim Brown, Steve Van Buren, and I think Lenny Moore, might have had 77 at the time too, who played 1 more year. His touchdown totals was very, historic, and some of that damage was done on those very good Giants teams in 62, 63. They just came up short in the championship games.
About Frank Gifford as a leader of the Giants.
Well, he was definitely somebody that the team looked at. Just overall, he's one of the probably 3 or 4 leaders on offense. I think Charlie Connerly is a little underrated in this day and age. Mr. Marlboro Man himself, was probably the leader on offense, but then you had Rosie Brown, on the offensive line, and then you had Gifford and Kyle Rote, kind of in the backfield and as, a flanker. So, but I think players looked at him, even with his more than average popularity in the city of New York, he was the one that everybody wanted to be around, and he would be on the cover of magazines and on some billboards and doing commercials. So, but I don't think, because everybody knew Gifford would come to play, he would get his nose dirty. He would get in, get in the dirt. He would not shy away from, so they knew Giff. I think, unbeknownst to some people, or like you said, like we talked about earlier about this generation, only knew him about being on TV and a good-looking guy. And no, he was a hard-nosed player. He did not shy away from contact and was a tough player. And I think that's what led him to being a good teammate. Like everybody, he could have easily probably got some jealousy with some players. Oh, why does he always gets the endorsements and gets the extra money? He's on TV. And obviously later, even when he was playing, he did some stuff for NFL Films, and he did some TV stuff because he wanted to go into broadcast. I don't believe there was, that much jealousy towards Giff, because he would always come ready to play, and they would see him as one of the best players. And, he just wasn't, hey, I'm trying to keep my nose from not being broken and, taking the hits and stuff. We'll come to we keep coming back to that.
We're going to be there in a minute.
Yeah. He survived. So I think those Giants teams, like even when they had reunions, everybody would love to see Giff and want to gravitate to him.
56 was, a magical year for the Giants. They won the NFL championship. They beat the Bears 47-7. Like we said, total yards from scrimmage, 1,422. 1958, he missed a couple of games. I mean, his total yards from scrimmage that year wasn't really that great, 798. He, like I said, though, he missed a couple of games. It was somewhat of a down year, but talk about 58 and his contributions to the team that made it to the NFL championship game, but lost to the Baltimore Colts in overtime in the greatest game ever played.
Yeah. 58 was, I think as that season went along, you could see most likely the Colts were going to be there. And then the Giants had to battle Paul Brown's Cleveland Browns, so I think they were setting up for that at the end of the year, because the schedule had them playing, late in the last game of that season, and then they had to play a playoff game, so. And they had to stop Jim Brown. You had to stop Jim Brown, and they did. They did, and they won, and that set up the 58 championship game. So, So I don't know if they were trying to preserve Gift because they had to win the division, late, but maybe that was it. It's like, hey, look, we need you for these games. So maybe instead of throwing him into the wild when he wasn't, quite 100%, because it took a lot for, especially not just Gifford, but a lot of players in the 50s. It took a lot for them to miss a game. Like you really had to be, in bad shape where you're really going to harm yourself, because those guys usually played through a lot, So, so I think the 58 game, for Gifford's legacy is a little conflicting. The game is considered the greatest game. It put the NFL more on the TV map. Obviously, the first game to go to overtime, especially championship game to go to overtime. But the play near the end of the regulation where he doesn't get the first down, where Gino Marchetti breaks his leg. He says he stopped him. Gifford says he got the first down. The commotion of getting Marchetti off the field with a broken leg, and the measurement coming up short, and they have to punt the ball. Of course, then Giannis leads them down, kicks the field goal. They go into overtime. Giannis leads them down, and they win the game. So I think Gifford always felt a little shortchanged, like, oh, we should have won that game. We had it won. He had a great game. He scored a touchdown. He was very productive, and he had the first down. If he gets the first down, the clock probably runs out. So I think he was a little conflicted because everybody makes a big deal of it. And obviously, Unitas's, legacy, grows, and his legend, that was his first, signature moment. So, I don't think Gifford was quite as nostalgic about that game as maybe some of the other players, like even on the Giants, because he played so well, and everybody thought he did have a fumble, and he did have the short run on third down where he thought he had the first down. So,
what was it about him and fumbling? He had a lot of fumbles over the course of his career. He had 48 fumbles over the course of his career. That's a lot of fumbles. One year he had 9.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit of that era. The era was a tough man's era. You could, a player could fall down and still get back up and run, and, or get tripped up and, you had the clothesline tackle by, Night Train Lane. It was still legal at the time. And so I think some of the play, dictated maybe, not securing the ball quite as much. But I think with some of these great players, and sometimes you get these Hall of Fame players, if you find one little flaw, which is probably the only flaw in Gifford's game was, that he could tackle, he could defend the pass, he could play defense, he could run, and all this stuff. That maybe he put the ball on the ground. Like I said, he's not the only one in the Hall of Fame, but it was an issue. And like I said, it did happen in the 58, championship game, with one of the fumbles. So, so I think it's a combination of both. Maybe he was a little loose with the ball, and then some of the way the tackling was back then, the ball would somehow find its way out of your hands.
He was most definitely on a Hall of Fame trajectory, even through the 58 season. And he had a really good rebound in 59. 1,308 yards from scrimmage. He caught 42 passes for 768 yards, 4 touchdowns, ran the ball 106 times for 540 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then 1960. The hit.
Yep.
He was having a decent season, and I don't know how else to put it. He got slaughtered by Chuck Bednarik of the Philadelphia Eagles. It was devastating. Tell us about his 1960 season, the Bednarik incident, and how devastating the injury was.
It's it always comes up, and the 100 greatest tackles and the biggest hits in NFL history. It's top 5. It shoots up. And everybody brings it up. And I was going to say it was unfortunate, but not. I mean, it's unfortunate that the injury was more severe, but it was a clean play. It was a clean hit, and I mean, he catches the pass on like a crossing route, and he just does not see Bednarik. And Bednarik hit him legal. It wasn't a cheap shot. It just happens to hit him at the right time, and with the right body balance, whatever you want to say. It happened, and he pretty much lays him out. Like I said, it wasn't a cheap shot. It wasn't like passing hit him early, or no, he caught the ball. He was getting ready to run, and bam, it was. So from that viewpoint, I think like I said, it wasn't a cheap shot, because it's not like because then if you see it over and over, you're just like, oh, look, that was a cheap shot, clothesline, or though that was, something that you should not have, was not legal at the time. So now injury wise, it was severe. I mean, it was so severe that Gifford missed an entire year. So it was not.
He missed the year. Was it? Did he? It was an awful concussion. Did he miss the year he had to sit out, or was it like, I'm retiring from the game, I've had enough?
No, I think it was more of recovery. It's one of those things, that if it happened now, I mean, he might miss, almost like Tua, a severe concussion could make you miss half the season now, so I think part of it was that, like, hey, I just need to recover. And it took a while. And then I think at that point, he's like, I think he's almost 30 years old, or roughly 30 years old at the time. Then maybe is thinking, I don't think he initially, a week later was like, oh, I'm retired from the sport. I'm done. No, they finished out the year. The Eagles actually went on to win the NFL championship. And so I think it was more of, I just want to recover, because once he went back in 1962, I mean, he played 62, 63, 64. Like, he played and like we talked about a little bit before, he played very well. So
he played well. I gotta ask, Chris. He played well, yes, as a flanker or receiver. He really didn't line up in the backfield anymore.
No.
Was that by design, or would the Giants have somebody better in the backfield? How did that?
No, I think it was more his skill set fit being a flanker, and maybe it was part to say, look, I get a little less wear and tear on my body. Although the hit by Bednarik was not a run play; it was going across the middle, and Concrete Charlie, the linebacker, was in his zone, so or in the area. So I think it was more, hey, the skill set, is much better as a flanker, especially with Y.A. Tittle. You got to think, Alex Sherman was the head coach now, and he just wanted to throw the ball. So, he had Del Schaffner, who should be in the Hall of Fame. That's a different story. But he did have Del Schaffner. He did have Frank Gifford, into the Kyle Road, I think, into the, but he loved to put the ball in there, and you saw Tittle put up historical stats, especially touchdown. Like, he set the NFL record for touchdowns in the season, once or twice. So I think that was more it. They were going to throw the ball a little bit more, and Gifford could still get open and make all the catches.
Mm-hmm. So did the injury affect the rest of his career?
I don't think so. I think when you watch, the highlights and the footage, like, he's just a really good receiver, so I don't think he shied away. And I don't think you can play at the NFL level, especially still in the 60s, if you don't like contact, you don't like, the playing the dirt, and all that stuff. So he might have found ways to protect himself a little bit better. I mean, Lynn Swann did that, during his career, to avoid certain things, as from the receiver standpoint. So I don't think it affected him to where, like, oh, I can't run certain routes, or I can't do these type of plays, or, I can't physically do something. I just think it was, hey, the skill sets as a flanker, and we have White Tittle who could throw the ball all over the place. Let's take advantage of that. Yeah.
Bednarik, Chuck Bednarik, who we talked about in 60-Minute Men. Was there any remorse? Did he ever say anything? It's part of the game.
For the most of his life, I think in his interviews, he pretty much took pride in the hit. He was fine with it, you know. I mean, he never, I guess he didn't physically like want to torment Gifford in later years because they're both in the Hall of Fame. They saw each other, every once in a while at events. So, but he did cherish that he knocked Pretty Boy, Gifford out of the game, supposedly, and then for a year. So he did not back away from that. I mean, if you know Chuck Bednarik and you've seen some of his videos, he doesn't hold back. He'll tell you what he thinks, and he'll tell you what he thinks of players and his era and things like that. So he took pride in it, and it was almost like a badge of honor. A little mark on your belt to say you took a player out of Gifford status. So he never shied away. Like I say, he wasn't waving his fist in front of Gifford all the time, like I beat you up. But if it came up, he did not shy away. Yeah, I knocked him out, and because I think the thing he got grief for was there was a well-known photograph taken where he's kind of standing above Gifford when Gifford's line. But if you watch the foot, like it's literally almost like when you see somebody like Muhammad Ali with his arms, it literally happens like that. It's like it's like a second, and he's going like this, and then he turns away, like he's not standing over him for 20 seconds doing it, just like some of those photos of Ali when he's standing over. It literally happens like 2 seconds, and the pose is gone. So I think he got a little grief, like, well, why could you? Because at that time he didn't know Gifford was knocked out and that they were going to have to put him on the stretcher. Like you just say, I just made a big play and dislodged, the catch, dislodged the ball. It was a fumble. And, so you're just thinking you made a play. And then all of a sudden, you realize that it might be more of a serious injury. So, so he didn't hold back any emotion, for that hit. He was kind of proud of it.
When Gifford came back in 62, was it celebrated? What was the reception like for him? What did people think about Frank Gifford when he finally came back?
I think from a standpoint from like media, they were like, oh, okay, we get Gifford back. But I think there was some trepidations like, oh, how's he going to be? When you sit out a year, it always happens like that. How good is this player going to be? Whether it's, Tom Brady who blows his knee out or, somebody like, DeMar Hamlin, who has a serious, play. So I think everybody was just nervous, and then I think it pretty quickly it went through, because once he started, making catches and playing, he didn't miss a lot of games, the next couple of years. So it wasn't like he was in and out of the, the lineup, because of injuries or, because of health or something. So, So I don't think at that time it was as big a deal. Once he started playing, then it was like, oh, he's playing.
We talked about Bednarik and his reaction, which was it was a legal hit, not the game. What about Gifford? What did he think about the hit?
Well, no, I think I think just because of, it's constantly shown in highlights, I think that's what he got tired of. I don't think he thought it was cheap. I don't believe I've seen interviews where he says, oh, it was a cheap shot. He just like, I didn't see him, and he didn't, I think you only get hit that hard if you just don't happen to see the defender, even back then. I mean, the game still played at a high speed, in the 50s, those players. So I think he was okay. I think he probably got tired of it. Like, okay, it's the, it's a one shot that always pops up in the, biggest hits and, greatest hits of all time and all this stuff. And then it was Bednarik. He probably is like, okay, you got the, loudmouth who likes to brag about it. And then he probably got tired of that. Like I said, it just, he wasn't going to go out of his way to talk down to Bednarik, like stop talking about the hit or stuff like that, So I don't, like I said, I think it sort of probably, got on his nerves and just dragged, okay, there's, at that time, there's, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years of NFL history. Let's not show this all the time as the, one of the best hit, although it is.
Yeah, they're sort of tied at the hip for history.
Absolutely.
In a different way, but same way as like baseball, Ralph Branca and Bob Thompson.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a perfect analogy. Yep.
The how did Frank Gifford sort of bridge the gap between the NFL's early rugged years and the modern professional era? How did he help bridge that gap? Take the game from what it was to the game to what it became?
Yeah, I mean, he's part of that, fabulous 50s era, that decade, definitely after World War II. Those players, sort of became more specialized in their positions, and could work on that. That was one thing that the 50s developed. TV was a big thing. So obviously, he helped the New York franchise, get established on TV during the 50s and definitely early 60s. So I think he just showed, what you can do as a versatile player, So the guys who played his position, coming a little bit later, like a Lenny Moore or a Bobby Mitchell, a Lance Allworth, the type of players like that, or Paul Warfield. Warfield, played some halfback at Ohio State, when he came out in '64, and then became one of the greatest, wide receivers. So I think he just showed that, he's part of the group. I'm not saying he's the one or the poster child, but he is an athlete that showed, hey, look, you can be versatile. This is how the game is going to be played, with this type of athlete, where maybe before, like I said, you're playing 60 minutes, it's a different type of athlete, where in the 50s and the 60s, it turned and hey, it's a different type of athlete. So he showed, hey, look, these are the type of athletes that good NFL teams need, like the Giants were so good from 55 to 64, so to speak, that's 10 years, the Packers had Paul Horney, the Rams had like a John Arnett. Like these are the type of athletes you had to have. So or an Ollie Matson, or Hugh McElhaney, like those are the type of athletes you had to have from the halfback position in order to win in this league. And the colleges were trying to produce those type of players, and the NFL was trying to get those type of players.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, like we said, he went into the College Football Hall of Fame. He went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His career ends. I mean, it's just a marvelous, terrific career, Hall of Fame career. And he winds up with a pretty spectacular second career as a broadcaster. How did he transition from the field to the broadcasting booth? Talk about that.
Yeah, he was one of the ones who took advantage of the popularity of football, especially pro football on TV. He, which you can also say, he was I would say a genius, but he was smart enough to see, hey, look, this sport's going to be good on TV. For the most part, a lot of times careers are over at 27, 28, let alone go to 30. He did play a little bit longer, but I'm going to need a second job. And I love football. I want to stay close to football. And this is a way of doing it. And because he took advantage of some of those opportunities even while I was playing. Even like in the early 60s, he did a few things for NFL Films. He did some things in New York, as a broadcaster, just to get his feet wet, to see how good he could be, to see if this is something you want to do. Where now it's almost, I wouldn't say most players think, but that is a career that players normally think about. Oh, I'll go into broadcasting. I could stay, broadcast games, talk about football. Where some people don't want, or some ex-players don't want anything to do with that. Like, I don't want to be on TV. I don't want to talk. And, but Gifford knew this is something he wanted to do. So he did it even while he was playing, and then when he retired, it came very, I wouldn't say easy, but somewhat, pretty easy transition into it. And then he had a huge fan at ABC in Roone Arledge, and he wanted him because Gifford had as big a name as anybody, especially in New York, so when he started thinking about, doing games and everything like that, and then all of a sudden 1970, Roone wants to do Monday Night Football, who really, that's the guy he wanted. He wanted Frank Gifford to be on the broadcast. He hadn't done it for, he was, Keith Jackson was actually the first play-by-play. He had been around a while, so, and then Meredith as the next player. So, and Howard Cosell was going to be in there. So Gifford was up there. He knew Gifford would attract just fans, would attract a female audience, he would attract, male audience, a young audience who still knew him a little bit at that time. Oh yeah, Gifford's. So he fits that mold, and he, like I said, he was with ABC for, 3 decades or whatever, and was a staple there.
How important was Gifford in the success of Monday Night Football? Would Monday Night Football be the staple it is today if Frank Gifford wasn't there in its infancy?
That's a good question. I think it still would have been popular at some, but it might not have been as smooth as it was, because the second year, Gifford moves to play-by-play. Howard is there just to, being annoying and, just say, and then Meredith was the good old boy who knew football and would counter, Cosell. So that was like the perfect match. I think it's almost like, Friends TV show or Seinfeld. I'm going off the wall, but where everybody's perfect. And I don't know if the show's, as successful if one part is missing. If you take out Ross or if you take out Kramer, like, does the show is it the same, greatness that you get? I think everybody played the role, and that's why it eventually became the phenomenon it did, is because each person did their roles and was at the top of their game every Monday night. Everybody was watching. Like I said, there was only, a handful of channels anyway, so everybody was watching. The NFL was starting to grow, and that was the game, everybody would be talking about, Tuesday, all day. So, instead of Sunday where you had all, so I think everybody played the part, and Gifford was like I said, he was the play-by-play guy that was going to.
Yeah, what really strikes me interesting about that is a player retires today and they go into the broadcast booth. They basically go in as the color commentator to talk about strategies, right? Like Troy Aikman and Tony Romo and now Tom Brady and Greg Olson, so forth and so on. Gifford was sort of a color commentator, but then he became a play-by-play announcer. You had Cosell, whatever you want, however you want to categorize him. And Meredith, he was the football guy. He was not the same kind of color commentator we have today, but he was the color commentator. And Gifford could have done all of that as well, but he really sort of stuck to the play-by-play. And he might have been the smartest guy in the booth as far as football IQ.
Oh, I think he was. Howard probably would say it was him, but no, Frank was definitely. And I think that just shows, like I said, I think he's underrated, maybe even as a broadcaster, is and he goes back to maybe his versatility days. I can do this. I can do play-by-play. I understand the game. I know, give the down and distance, give the yards, get out of the way of Howard and his, craziness and his over the top. Let Dandy Don be Dandy Don. Like, he knew how to do that almost. And I think the great play-by-plays are like that, whether it's a 2-man booth or definitely when you get a 3-man booth, is the play-by-play knows when to talk and when not to talk, or set up. And the play-by-play does that. I mean, Al Michaels does that, like set up your color guy. I mean, there was 2 of them you had to, and then he went and had, Dan Deerdorf and Dan Fout. Like he did it for 3 decades. It wasn't just those years. Those years put, Monday Night Football on the map, but then also he had to do it with other guys. And it does take some chemistry. It's not an easy thing to just, okay, you throw, I hate to say it, Joe Tessitore and Jason Witten, who never done it, and Burger McFarland, and that was all over the place.
Yeah.
So it takes some chemistry. It's not easy to say, hey, we're going to put these 2 people or 3 people together. And you saw Brady went through a lot of growing pains this year, and because he's never done it. He's his first games he's ever doing. So I think, and like I say, Gifford handled it like a pro, and I think, Roone Arledge, deserves some credit because he saw what Gifford could do. So I think behind the scenes, he's like, I'm going to try to do everything I can to make Gifford successful, because he's got to lead these other 2 guys and he's got to lead the broadcast,
Did Frank Gifford's career as a broadcaster complement his NFL career, or did his NFL career complement his broadcast career?
That's interesting. I think I would always go with the NFL complements the broadcaster, because even back in the 50s, even the 40s, 30s, I think most NFL players, want to have the best career and do the best. They want to win. They put in the effort. They put it, put all their heart into it. I mean, Gifford lost a year of playing because he got destroyed on a tackle. I don't think you're lukewarm about the game or, your work habits. That's why some players, I think, sometimes they have a hard time adjusting once they leave. So I think you take that and then you use that. And maybe Brady is doing that. Brady's using, hey, I want to get better. So he's studying more. He's studying his tapes. What can I do better? What can I pronounce better? I mean, there's some guys, when you look back at their career, I mean, if you watch Tom Jackson, his first year, or like Terry Brett, they were awful. Bradshaw as an announcer was awful. Like, you're like, oh my God, you're going to put this guy on every week. Tom Jackson was terrible his first year or 2 at ESPN doing, match or prime time and the pregame show. But he learned and he got better and he wanted to work that. And then he turned, and he's an Emmy Award winning analyst. And so sometimes it's easy or you see players like Joe Montana, who did it. He was not very good. You saw that he was uncomfortable, and then he saw it and was like, okay, I'm going to, and after a year or 2, and they're done, because it takes some talent. It does take some working at it. It does take some knowledge to do it and be comfortable doing it. And some guys are easier at it. The Romos and the Greg Olsons of the world, who as soon as they retire, they step in the booth and they're people are tired of Romo, but they're very good. They're already very good. Where guys like Phil Simms and those type of guys, Terry Bradshaw knew he wasn't going to be good at games, so that's why he went to studio. And he was not very good at games, and or somebody just you got to work at it. You get better at it. So and so going back to so I think Gifford. I think you take because you take those certain things, your work ethic, your dedication, your competitiveness. Hey, I don't want to suck at this, and does Brady really want to embarrass himself? Like, wow, I was a terrible analyst. No, he wants to be good at it. So he's going to take what he learned for 20-something years, and he's going to apply it to the broadcasting part.
Yeah, I think if Gifford played today and then became a broadcaster, it'd be a much different story. But because there wasn't the national television coverage back in the day when Frank Gifford played, compared to his days as the guy on Monday Night Football, I think he's remembered more for what he did in the broadcast booth than what he did on the field. What he did on the field was Hall of Fame worthy.
Yep, both at the college and NFL level, and so.
Well, Chris, thanks again for enlightening us about one of the greats of to ever play in the NFL. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, but I do. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much for joining me again on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
No, thanks for having me on, Warren. Like I said, anytime you want to talk early NFL history, I'm there. So thanks for having me on again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime. Thanks. Gifford was also pretty darn good when it came to the postseason. He played in 5 NFL championship games, although the Giants only won the game once, 1956, when he rushed for 30 yards. But he caught 4 passes for 131 yards, including a 67-yard touchdown catch. His best game on the ground came in 1958, the game against the Colts, when he rushed for 155 yards on 35 carries and again caught a touchdown pass. In 1977, Gifford was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 2 years earlier, he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Hey, once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Chris Willis, and thanks to all of you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.